This is the end. That's a bit dramatic, but this is the end of this series. The only thing left to do is now create the final outline in the hopes that I have a final product that I can use as the starting point for when actually writing the scenes. Basically, we're ending the series as we started it with a video from Abbie. This one is how to write a chapter by chapter outline for your novel, which is exactly what I need. Let's look at this final video and then let's review all the videos and how helpful they were.
Alright, so let's get into the next step of the plotting process, my chapter by chapter outline. Once I have my rough sketch, my bullet point outline, and my character profiles, I move on to the third step of plotting, which is breaking everything down chapter by chapter to see what happens when. Usually this involves a super long outline, or at least an outline that ends up being super long, which I mentioned back in this rough sketch video. Usually my long outlines end up being like 20,000 words, but I don't necessarily need to have all that detail when I first set out to write the first draft.
That's fortunate because I have 4 pages and probably just about 2,000 words of outline. But I think it should still work. Like she said, like something bullet point like. We have something bullet point like, and the character profile, I mean the characters are anyway a problem, so okay.
In fact, sometimes all I need is like a bullet point list of what's going to happen in that chapter. But regardless of whether
I don't have the chapters, but okay.
Or just a few bullet points, I always plan out my chapters using virtual index cards in my Scrivener. So let's dive into the computer now, and I'm going to show you what this process looks like. Alright, so here I am inside of a new Scrivener project, and for this example, I'm going to continue using my Christmas book, Tessa and Weston, Best Christmas Ever, which was my sequel to 100 Days of Sunlight. And if you remember the first Preptober video, I was using that as an example, so we're going to go ahead and use that as an example here as well, just so that we can continue down this path of what my plotting process looks like. So
I like this approach to having like the same project and showing the writing process. Sorry about the light, I don't know, sunlight. That made it worse. Okay, so I like this approach because that makes it really easy to follow along, right? If you have like a project and you can basically look at the project, maybe even if you know the story itself, if you've read it, it will make it even easier. But kind of having like the thing that I did here with this series, which I've tried out, was basically just stitching different videos together, right? And they're coming in very different shapes and forms, obviously. That was kind of also the point of this series. Made it a bit more fun to try out the different kinds of things. But it would be much easier if you have like a series where it's one project and they show the entire writing process and each step, right? So I like the approach of those kinds of tutorial videos.
In that first outline video, you probably remember that I shared with you my first initial rough sketch of the story, and I shared how I take my rough, messy ideas and turn them into a coherent, short and sharp outline. So I have here my brain dump, and this is, of course, this is a longer document than I shared in the first video because I have a ton more notes. And as you can see in my brain dumps, a lot of times I write dialogue as well that will end up going in the actual manuscript. So if you've read Tessa and Weston, Best Christmas Ever, you're probably recognizing some of this dialogue right now. But I'll write like messy notes to myself and just random ideas that I have. So as you can see, it's very disorganized, and a lot of times it's not super coherent, and that's okay because I have not reached the step of this process where I make all of this coherent. That's what we're going to do right now. You also comment.
So the problem is that I don't really have this kind of brain dump to work with, right? I really added the very structured approach. But I think what we could do here is let's do the coherent thing first and then use the technique that there was the brain dumping and the brainstorming from video. What was it? Was it number 4, number 5? You know which video, this video here. we could use that technique and apply it here within this technique and kind of like start to brain dump and brainstorm stuff when we get to the actual scenes, and to try it the opposite way, right? Because right now I don't have a brain dump to work with.
However, in this example, I'm going to show you right now how I would take my rough sketch and my 3-act story structure bullet point outline and kind of merge those two things together, so all my messy ideas plus the structure, to create a chapter by chapter outline using the feature in Scrivener, which allows me to see my corkboard with my index cards. So this is the corkboard view in Scrivener, and if you're told...
Okay, do I get this right? So it's basically just sorting, right? So basically you have like the outline that we have, this structure thing with the turning points, or the 3-act structure that she's using, and then you should also have some sort of brain dump with kind of all your inspiration and ideas. For this future storyline, I don't really have much of that, because I basically started from scratch by going with future wartime travel and nothing more. But if I did the same thing, say for the present storyline, then I basically have my notebook. I like to use OneNote for notebooking stuff, and here I basically always kind of collect random starter stuff, or like I have some inspiration for what the thread could look like and stuff like that. So all this kind of stuff, you would sort it into some sort of outline into it, right? So that's kind of what she has here, I guess, when she means brain dump, some sort of inspirations. She said something about having dialogue stuff, right? Because what I've been doing for the last year with the present storyline is trying to figure out what the story is while writing it. I do have like this massive amount of, it's not necessarily scenes, a lot of it is like narration, right? But everything that whenever I came up with some sort of like dialogue line or stuff like that, I basically wrote it into a scene, because I'm doing this thing where I'm forcing myself to write every day. So because of that, I basically have it in some sort of written form. Basically, I could do the same thing that she's doing here by using the structure and then placing all the scenes that I have in terms of order, what chapter they're going in. And all of this stuff she would also pack into the structure, right? So either having actual scenes and organizing them in the structure form, or putting the inspiration there, so when you're actually writing it, you remember what the thread would look like when describing it, something like that. If I get this correctly, I think that's what this is. When she says like the brain dumping, I think that's what this basically contains, right? So all the notes that you have, basically trying to organize them at the place where you would need them. So obviously I can't do that right now for the future storyline, because I don't have anything other than this stuff here. So let's start with this anyway and just put that into order.
But for the purposes of our example, I'm just going to fill out some blank placeholder documents here that will represent the chapters of the book. So let's start with 4 chapters. So this is my corkboard view, and to switch over to corkboard view, all you do is click the top folder name, in this case it's manuscript, and then up here in the top navigation bar, you'll see 3 different views. One is your scrivenings, which is all of your documents, like one after the other. One is the corkboard view, and one is the outline view. So this is the corkboard view that you want to be on in order to see these index cards. So how do we write on these index cards? So going over...
Okay, so the only small complaint, and it's kind of like a petty complaint, but I like the whole structure of how, like I said, kind of like taking one project, taking it through the whole writing series kind of process, having different videos covering it. I really like that approach. The problem is that here it's very much hinges on using Scrivener, it seems, right? It's like a vital part of this whole series, which, like I said, it's kind of like petty because it's very specific, and obviously probably there are a lot of people who work with Scrivener and like this. For me, it's really not that useful to hear all that stuff because I don't use this software, and would be nice to see it in a way done that isn't so software focused. But yeah.
You can actually just double click right here and start writing some text right here. So chapter 1, of course, is the hook. And I want to reference my mini 3-act story structure while I do this. So I'm going to jump back over to that. And I'm just going to copy and paste this. So I'm going to copy this. And one thing I love about Scrivener is how there's always a place to write notes to yourself. You're never at a loss for like, where do I stick this note? So right now I'm going to go up to the top right corner and open the inspector panel. So I'm just going to paste my notes right there so that I can see them. And I can even copy this or highlight this text and make the font a bit larger so I can see it better. Okay, so I wrote for my hook, cozy Christmas vibes, cute West Test things, etc. I'm obviously going to expand upon that because I want to show my reader more of what has been happening in these characters' lives since the previous book. This is going to be the opening scene. So it's the opening chapter. Tessa is waking up to the first snow. Cozy Christmas vibes, I can still keep that. Cute West Test things, specifically a snowball fight. So that's in chapter 1. I knew that in my brain dump I wanted to have a snowball fight. So right away I'm finding a place for that. Cute West Test snowball fight, and at breakfast, Weston invites Tessa to go sledding with him and his brothers. That's kind of all that happens in chapter 1, but I want to hint at the conflict of the inciting incident, which is the next plot point, of course. And also, another thing that I want to do here is add the point of view. So chapter 1, I know I'm going to start from Tessa's point of view. Chapter 2 is going to alternate to Weston's point of view. So I'm just going to Weston there, and then we'll go back to Tessa, and then...
My question here is more kind of like a story question, because she obviously uses this example, which is that I get it's a sequel, so probably the people who read the story would be invested in the characters already, but I don't really understand what the hook in this specific opening is, because the hook is supposed to give the reader the reason why they would want to read this story, right? And here, the only reason I can see why you would want to read the story is because you already love these characters and you just want to spend time with them. So is that kind of the hook here, or what exactly is the hook in this opening? And wouldn't the hook be the central drama conflict that happens in the story, setting that up, the thing that she said, hinting at the inciting incident, right? I feel like that should already be in chapter 1. So giving this conflict of the mother coming into town should already be in there, because this right now to me feels a bit like a happy scene that happens later on, kind of like a calm moment, and maybe it follows the first story, and when we were left off it ties into that, maybe. So yeah, that's just kind of like my question here. Not at all trying to, criticize the opening here or so, but rather really, if you see what the hook is, can you kind of spell it out for me and why it would work for you? Okay, so let's actually try it out. Best way to keep this structure and also start. One thing that I'm also kind of a bit confused about to figure out right now is the chapters. I think she just kind of started to fill out chapters, right? She doesn't really know how many there are. She's just trying to fill them up, and then basically based on the things that happen in there, the plot points in there, then the next chapter happens, right? What is the switch between chapters? When does one chapter end and the next one start? And is it chapters, or is it in this case, because from what she's writing here, it seems to be that scenes and chapters are basically the same thing, right? That basically the opening thing, that's kind of like a scene, right? And then, or does more than just that happen in there? Is it like one scene is basically we're having breakfast, the next one is we're having a snowball fight? Could also be the case, right? Doesn't make sense more if it's like that. Okay, so let's start with chapters, then break it down to scenes within that. Okay, so chapter 1. Who's the viewpoint character here? I think I want to start with the detective. you remember, the detective is basically supposed to be the opening character, the one that we meet first. The reason why I want to be in this character's viewpoint is because this person has he's basically, or is it a he? I don't even know yet if it's a he or she. Okay, this character, who knows, is the person who knows the most in terms of the missing persons thing. You know, has like this person will learn all about new missing person cases. Is like in the best position to get the most information, is the person who actively should do something about it, find out what is going on. And also in terms of reader, it's this detective character knows a bit more than the reader do, but they will quickly catch up to what they know. So what I mean with that is that basically when the story kicks off, the detective character knows where they live, right? What this world is like, what their job is, and that there are missing people cases that are bothering them right now. That's kind of like all the stuff that this character knows that the readers don't yet know, but will quickly learn through the viewpoint of this character. And then once they figured all that out, they're basically in the same position as the character and know the same thing, which is there are missing people cases, but they don't know why or what is going on, and then they can follow along with the detective to find out what is going on. So I very much want a viewpoint character who can give the reader the little exposition they need in order to be able to follow along with the mystery, and then be the same kind of, and then have the same level of knowledge as the readers do, which is hardly anything, so that it really is interesting for the readers to figure out what is going on. And now, what do I do now? Okay, so then basically I should fill in as much of the brain dumping stuff that I don't know, right? So let's go to the U turning point. So what is the opening hook? Like we talked about the hook, right? What would be the most interesting thing for a reader to see here? And this is basically why I asked so many questions about what is the hook in her example, right? Because depending on what kind of story you're telling, there are different kinds of hooks possible, right? The way that I would define a hook is very much the promise to the reader that this is worth their time. So kind of something that interests them. And like I said, for me, when I start a story, it's never the characters unless I already know the characters. So maybe in this case, in her case, the opening hook is that the people who read this story know those characters and are specifically there for those characters, and to see how that relationship has progressed. So then that would be the opening hook element, right? Actually, looking at it, I think that's actually exactly what she intends to be the hook, because here for the hook in the note she has cute coupley things in there, right? So that's what's supposed to keep the reader there, is the relationship between these two characters. What is supposed to keep my reader there? And that's really the mystery of what happened to those missing people, right? The problem that I see there a bit is that so many stories start with missing people cases, right? And the more you see it, the less it works. And you really need to have like another element, or at least for me, you need to have another element to keep my interest and make me invested in the story. Because just because someone's missing, as a reader, I don't feel confident enough yet that this is worth my time. So for me, the best hook I've ever seen in a story is really the opening of Attack on Titan. It basically starts with the character is looking at something, but we don't know what it is yet, right? And then we have like this situation where there's this giant hand reaching over the wall, and then we see this giant figure, and as the viewer, reader, we don't know yet where we are. We just see kind of like this situation unfold, and we have to catch up very quickly. And then right from there we get question after question of what are Titans, what is going on here, where are we, why do they attack, why do they eat people, you know, all those kind of questions, they keep coming. And that's really why I feel like this is like the best hook that I've ever seen in a story, because from the beginning, from that moment when I first kind of saw this figure looming over the wall and wanted to know what is going on, I never really had time to reconsider if I wanted to watch the entire anime or if I wanted to leave, you know, because it just kept going and playing into each other. So what is the opening hook that keeps them there? It has to be the missing people cases, but they have to be framed in a more interesting way. And something that I said in an earlier video was that probably I should be able to convey the tone of the story, what is possible, right? That there's something strange going on here. If it's just missing people cases, it could also be kind of like a murder series or stuff like that, right? But I want, from the beginning, let the reader know that maybe there will be supernatural elements or aliens or stuff like that, you know, so that it doesn't come out of nowhere. So the opening mystery would be there are a lot of missing people cases, all within the last 3 weeks, and there is no trace of anyone. So that could be maybe the combination of those two things. It's, first of all, we have those missing people cases, but then also that has happened in a very short amount of time. There are no traces of what is going on. So, and then the opening scene could be in some way playing through all the different theories, you know, kind of like detective goes over all the go-to theories and why they are debunked. And in some way show in the opening scene that they have already excluded that it's people going missing on hiking trips. Maybe it's happening probably within a town or like in a more urban area. They also already excluded that it could be like serial killers or something like that, because there are too many people going missing. There are no traces of anyone going missing. Maybe there's even like a case where you have like this situation where there was like let's say there was like a garden party and someone went into the house to grab a bottle of ketchup. When they came back, about, let's say 50 people were all gone without a trace. That could be interesting as an opening scene. That basically the detective arrives at the scene of some sort of garden party where the person who called them is the only one who's still around. There were 50 people around. They were in the house for less than 5 minutes, and now everybody's gone. Maybe a bit more than 5 minutes, so it's realistic, but you get what I mean, right? That's kind of like the opening scene that we arrive at, and then we get exposition. This is working well for me. Exposition that there are other cases where people have gone missing, but not to this extent. I really like this ghost element of them going missing in, like, you know, such a short amount of time without any traces. Which, of course, when it comes to creating the monster itself, so the creatures and how they function, would probably suggest that those people all walked out themselves before turning. So they just kind of like, when everybody mind control style left all at once, that would explain how that is possible, right? And that could also then later, does this happen already here? Part of the, let's make like a scene. Investigation. Find out through surveillance cameras that people have walked away themselves. Some neighbor or maybe some convenience store in the area had like cameras outside, and from there they're basically picking up that at least some of the people who left the garden party did so by just walking away, and it's like in no panic or whatever, they're just kind of like calmly walking away, which of course adds to the mystery of what is going on. This could be kind of like this situation where it seems like, is this a hoax? Prank. But then how does this tie into the other cases? So making it look like those people obviously walked away themselves, so there is something, maybe it's not like a crime or anything, it's just kind of like a stupid prank or some sort of stupid online movement, you know, kind of like something like that. And adding, of course, those other cases where the other people who went missing never came back, and then these people also don't come back. Is that like its own scene? I think so, right? So the first scene would be garden party in party investigation. And then investigation continues. That's like scene number 2.
Okay, so our next plot point is the first plot point. So that's the logical next step of what comes after these story beats. So let's go ahead and make 2 more cards, and I can do that just by clicking the little plus sign down here at the bottom to create a new document. And as you can see, those 2 new documents just showed up in my manuscript folder. So I'm going to go ahead and name them Chapter 5, Tessa, and Chapter 6, Weston. Okay, so these 2 chapters are going to be respectively the first plot points or impossible choices for both of these characters. So this is going to be Tessa's first plot point when she has to deal with some conflict about how she's bitter about the past, and so she plans to avoid Mom a lot because she wants to have a good Christmas with Weston. And a lot of this conflict is sparked from the previous chapter, so that awkward first meeting between Weston and Tessa's mom is sort of what sparks this new bitterness in Tessa. It makes her really determined to avoid her mom a lot during her stay. I might add something here like in wake of the previous chapter, Tessa is even more bitter about her mom and finds that she can't let go of the past. So she plans to avoid Mom a lot, and she just wants to have a good Christmas with Weston. Now, of course, I would add more detail to this when I'm going to actually go and write the chapter. This is really all I need to start the process of brainstorming these chapters in more detail, and even start the process of writing these chapters, writing the first draft. So then we have Chapter 6 from Weston's point of view. This has to be sort of the same plot point. First plot point from Weston's point of view. So in this chapter, Weston has a pep talk with Rudy, then he later talks to Tessa about the momish.
Okay, so basically the process seems to be exactly this, right? It's taking the structure and then based on the story beats that I already have, fleshing out the scene more, and where does it go from there naturally, right? I did a bit underestimate how long this would obviously take, so I'm debating whether to force you to see the entire thing. I think that seems a bit cruel. Okay, so generally speaking, like I said, I do like the approach. If I get it correctly, then it's basically kind of like a mix between a chaotic approach of where you have like all these inspirational things that you gathered in like some sort of either word or here it's one note, you know, kind of like in one place. And then you also have what we did for the last 10 videos, which is basically creating some sort of structure, some sort of plot outline, and taking the structure as a blueprint, filling in all the details to flesh out the scenes so that you have like all the inputs in one place. What I'm going to do now is take all of that and apply it to my story here to create the outline. That was a lot harder than I thought it would be.